Today, I'm Mark Broom. Let's start with a look at the day's headlines. The US-North Korea summit is no more, for now at least. In a letter to Kim Jong-un, President Trump cites the North's tremendous anger and open hostility as the reason for pulling out. However, Trump leaves the door open for a summit at a later date. A rapid response from Pyongyang, and a surprisingly measured one at that. The regime's vice foreign minister says, with an open mind, we are willing to solve the problem. We have the latest from our correspondent. Plus, North Korea demolishes what it claims to be its only nuclear test site, setting off several explosions in the presence of foreign journalists. So let's start with the news that has reverberated around the world. We'll see has turned into we are out, at least for the time being. US President Donald Trump delivered the news in a letter that he was pulling the plug on the North Korea-US summit. He later spoke about it at the White House, pointing to Pyongyang's tremendous anger and open hostility as the reason behind his decision. However, Trump said the ball is now firmly in Pyongyang's court and he's open to a summit down the road if the regime cools its rhetoric. Kwon Jang-ho starts us off.
US President Donald Trump shocked the world with his sudden cancellation of the highly anticipated North Korea-US summit that had been set for June 12th in Singapore.
I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. While many things can happen and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially, I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world.
During his statement at the White House on Thursday, President Trump said a bright and beautiful future can only happen when the threat of nuclear weapons is removed, and warned Pyongyang that the US military is more ready than it has ever been before. Adding the US has support from its allies, including South Korea and Japan, President Trump urged North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to ultimately do what is right for himself and for his people, stressing that his administration's maximum pressure and sanctions campaign will remain in the meantime. Trump nevertheless left the door open for a future meeting with Kim.
Hopefully everything's going to work out well with North Korea, and a lot of things can happen, including the fact that perhaps, and would wait, it's possible that the existing summit could take place or a summit at some later date. Nobody should be anxious. We have to get it right.
The news was announced early in the day in a letter to Kim Jong-un that was released by the White House. President Trump's letter pointed to the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in North Korea's most recent statements as the reason for the cancellation. This appears to be in relation to remarks made by North Korea's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Choi Sun-hee, who lashed out at US Vice President Mike Pence for saying the North could end up like Libya if a deal is not reached. Trump concluded the letter saying the world, and North Korea in particular, had lost a great opportunity for lasting peace and prosperity. But he also put the ball back in Pyongyang's court, saying he's always open for talks should Kim Jong-un change his mind. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
So the news is coming thick and fast since President Trump cancelled his planned summit with Pyongyang. Within the past couple of hours, North Korea's vice foreign minister has released a statement on the situation. For details on that, let's connect to our Unification Ministry correspondent, Oh Jung-hee. So Jung-hee, take us through this response. It's fair to say the content came out of left field, considering the regime's track record of all these fiery statements directed directly at the United States.
Mark, North Korea was quick to respond, and I must tell you that this morning's statement from the North is one of the most gentle statements I've ever seen from the regime. Less than 3 hours ago, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Jong-un released a statement saying the North is willing to give the U.S. more time and opportunity, which means Pyongyang is still willing to sit down with Washington for summit talks. Remember how President Trump cited the North's fury and hostility in his statement. Pyongyang claimed that only followed Washington's pressure pressure on North Korea's unilateral denuclearization, and this situation, which shows a very deep rift between the two, rather means that the summit talks are desperately needed. North Korea did express regret towards Trump's decision, but at the same time appealed that the regime has been highly anticipating the summit, as well as what the White House has suggested as a Trump model. The statement also said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been pouring his efforts into summit preparations. The North stressed that both sides can't be perfectly satisfied at their first attempt, but if they solve their issues one by one, then their relations will only get better, not worse. Pyongyang wrapped up its statement saying it's willing to sit down face-to-face with Washington at any time to solve their issues. Mark.
Well, thank you, Jung, for that report. Now, following news of President Trump's cancellation of the North Korea-US summit, South Korea's presidential Blue House released a statement where President Moon Jae-in expressed his regret the summit will not be held on June 12th as scheduled. He said denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and enduring peace are historic tasks that cannot be abandoned or delayed. Our chief Blue House correspondent, Moon Gon-young, with the details.
Baffled and very regretful were the immediate words from South Korean President Moon Jae-in in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's abrupt cancellation of the planned meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore that had been set for June 12. South Korea's presidential Blue House said it had not received any advance notice and was caught off guard Thursday night by the cancellation. In a statement released following an hour-long emergency meeting of its National Security Council at midnight, the South Korean president urged both North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump to resolve the issue through direct dialogue. He said the sensitivity and difficulty of such diplomatic issues call for direct and more close dialogue by the leaders. Current way of communications just will not work. Mr. Trump's cancellation of the Singapore summit comes within 48 hours of Mr. Moon's visit to the White House on Tuesday to solely convince the U.S. president that meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un was still worth it. How and whether this will affect future Seoul-Washington relations, Seoul-Pyongyang relations, and even Pyongyang-Washington relations, we'll have to wait and see. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News.
Now, the various political heavyweights in the United States and leaders from all over the world have been voicing their opinions on President Trump's decision to cancel the summit for the time being. Park Hee-jun with the details.
The international community was rocked by the cancellation of what would have been the denuclearization talks of the century. First, within the United States, there were mixed responses within Congress. Most Republican lawmakers approved of President Trump's decision, with some saying the meeting would have been treacherous if it had gone ahead. House Speaker Paul Ryan said in a statement shortly after the announcement that the North Korean regime must show more commitment to a peaceful resolution and the maximum pressure campaign must continue. Democrats criticized President Trump for making a, quote, amateur decision that shows his lack of preparedness for the meeting. The Pentagon appears to be ready for whatever comes next, saying it's fully prepared to respond to any provocative actions from the North. Director of the U.S. Joint Staff, Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie, said that if any actions occur from Pyongyang, the U.S. will work with its allies to confront them. Meanwhile, world leaders are voicing their disappointments. Russian President Vladimir Putin said he regretted Trump's decision as he claimed North Korea had been keeping its promises. Speaking at a news conference with the French president, Putin said the meeting would have been the start of the denuclearization process on the Korean Peninsula, adding that he hoped efforts would continue. The British government said it was disappointed the summit will no longer go ahead. A spokesperson for Prime Minister Theresa May said an agreement is needed for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and the UK will continue to work with its international partners until it's achieved. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also expressed deep disappointment and urged all parties to continue dialogue for peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Other parties, including key regional players China and Japan, are currently working on a response to President Trump's decision. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, despite the sudden cancellation of the planned summit between the leaders of North Korea and the US, Washington's top diplomat Mike Pompeo has batted away criticism the Trump administration was not seriously preparing for the now defunct Singapore meeting, saying there was no response from Pyongyang. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has revealed North Korea did not respond to repeated requests from U.S. officials to discuss logistics for the now canceled summit between the two sides. Testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Thursday, Pompeo said there was a lack of response from the North, despite his prior talks in Pyongyang with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
I can add to that, over the past many days, we have endeavored to do what Chairman Kim and I had agreed, was to put preparation teams together to begin to work to prepare for the summit, and we had received no response to our inquiries from them.
Pompeo added the lack of response from the North strongly suggested the Kim regime was not getting ready for the talks. At the same time, he shot down criticism the U.S. wasn't ready for the summit either. Pompeo insisting they were ready to go.
I disagree with what you said in your opening statement. I think the American team's fully prepared. I think we're rocking. I think we're ready. I think we're prepared for this meeting. I think President Trump's prepared for this meeting. We were fully engaged over the past weeks to prepare for this meeting. So I disagree with your assessment that the Americans are not ready.
In the past month, the top U.S. diplomat met with the North Korean leader twice, traveling to Pyongyang as Trump's CIA director in April, and then as Secretary of State early this month. In all, Pompeo has met with Kim for over 3 hours, during which he stressed the importance of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, followed by the release of 3 American prisoners in North Korea. Despite the setback, Pompeo hopes the two countries can quickly return to possibility of a summit. But he stressed the maximum pressure campaign continues. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, we finally have the footage of the dismantling of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. It came in this morning, Korea time, and we are going to show you some of the footage of the tunnel demolitions. Some other buildings were brought down as well. For more, we have our Foreign Ministry correspondent Lee Ji-won, who is part of South Korea's press corps for Punggye-ri, joining us here in the studio. We've both had a very long night preparing for this, with all the news coming out, Ji-won. But fill us in on what we are seeing from these video footage.
Mark, so as much as the footage are still arriving freshly from the Wonsan, where the press center is built for the international reporters, let's first take a look at the footage and I'll guide you through it. So as you can see, that is the first tunnel that went down. That's the tunnel number 2, or also known as the North Portal. Now that's where so as you can see, that's the entrance to the tunnel. And right beside it is the observation building, which has also been destroyed together with the portal. Now that's the view from outside, which is some 500 meters away from the mountain. That's the special observation platform that's been set up for the reporters. And as you can see, that is the second tunnel that's been destroyed. That's the West Portal, and that's also known as tunnel number 4. And apparently the reporters were able to get a close view of the tunnel just before it got demolished.
Yeah.
So that is the view of it from outside.
It kind of looks smaller than I'd imagine it to be. I was expecting larger scale explosions, but I suppose they're just destroying the entrances here, correct?
Yes, well, the entrances, some of the tunnels are already weak because of the numerous nuclear test sites, nuclear tests. And so just by destroying the entrance, it's already good enough to destroy the whole test site. And that is the last tunnel remaining. That is the South Portal, which is tunnel number 3. That is the entrance, and as you can see, that's the group of reporters. Now, just for your information, you must be guessing where tunnel number 1 is, and that is the East Portal. Yeah. But that has been closed since 2006, when the first nuclear test was held. It's been seriously contaminated, so it hasn't been used ever since then.
Right, so no point destroying that tunnel, and if it's contaminated, no one presumably wants to go close to it to hook it up with dynamite. But tell us more about this ceremony itself, because looking at that footage, it's a lot more professional than I thought it might be. I thought we might be seeing smartphone video from the reporters, but that looks like it's freshly produced video straight from the north itself. But tell us more about this ceremony and the process behind it.
Yes, well, you said it looks very professional, and from what we've been observing for the past few weeks, the North has been preparing a lot for this ceremony, and this comes as North Korea announced its plans to destroy its Punggye-ri nuclear test site a few weeks ago, and it had invited reporters from South Korea, China, the US, Russia, and the UK to witness the moment. Now, there have been problems along the way, but reporters, including those from South Korea, all successfully gathered at the Galma Hotel in Wonsan in the east coast of the peninsula on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, they departed from the hotel at Wonsan station, and they got on a 12-hour train ride from Wonsan to Jaedeok station, which is near the entrance to the massive test site. And from there, they had to take another 4-hour bus ride on dirt roads and then hike for another 2 hours to reach the test site. So that's a really arduous and long journey, as you can see. And when the reporters got there, they were allegedly briefed by the North Korea's Nuclear Weapons Institute Deputy Chair Kang Kyung-ho near the North Portal. And just for your information, there were around exactly 30 reporters, international reporters at this site from 5 countries representing their broadcasters, including CNN and Korea's MBC.
Right, well, that was a fascinating insight to what actually happened at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. We've been wondering what it was going to look like for the whole of this week. And let's hope those journalists come back safe and sound. We know they've had a really arduous few days because it's a very remote part of North Korea to get to. And well, thank you very much for your reporting, Ji-won. At short notice, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, let's get some perspective. We were about to get some expert views from the US. We are attempting to connect, I believe. Right, well, apologies for the technical issues we are having at the moment. We are planning to speak to a North Korea expert, or are you going to do world news? That's what I'd like to know. It appears as though we are going to talk about international news. And we're going to start in Hollywood. Oscar-winning actor Morgan Freeman has apologized after 8 women accused him of sexual misconduct. Ex-Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein, the person at the center of this Me Too movement, will also reportedly turn himself in to New York police to face criminal charges. So it seems like he is in extremely serious legal trouble. For more on this and other international news, let's turn to our No Aram. So Aram, this Me Too movement really now seems to be heating back up again.
That's right, Mark. CNN reported Thursday that it spoke to 8 women who claimed were victims of what some called harassment and others called inappropriate behaviour by Morgan Freeman. 8 others said they witnessed the actor's alleged misconduct on movie sets and in the offices of his production company. One of the alleged victims was a production assistant on the set of Freeman's recent film, Going in Style. She told CNN that the actor repeatedly tried to lift up her skirt and asked if she was wearing underwear. She also claimed that Freeman subjected her to unwanted touching and comments about her figure and clothing on a near daily basis. The others gave similar accounts. Freeman released a statement through his publicist apologizing to anyone who felt uncomfortable or disrespected. He insisted that it was never his intent, adding that anyone who knows him knows he would never intentionally offend or knowingly make anyone feel uneasy. Meanwhile, the person who triggered this whole recent wave of Me Too activists, Harvey Weinstein, is reportedly going to hand himself in to the NYPD on Friday. US media reports the disgraced movie mogul is expected to face sexual misconduct charges following an investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. More than 70 women have accused Weinstein of sexual abuse, including rape. Weinstein has denied having non-consensual sex with anyone. His lawyers, the NYPD and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office have all declined to confirm the news reports. In other news, the European Union has criticised the Trump administration's plan to impose tariffs on imported vehicles on grounds of national security. The Vice President of the European Commission said Thursday that any unilateral US auto tariffs would violate World Trade Organization rules. The US Commerce Department's probe into foreign cars could lead to a jump in import tariffs similar to those imposed on steel and aluminium in March. Nearly 1 million truckers in Brazil are striking for a fourth day on Thursday to protest against high diesel prices. The demonstrations have led to roads being blocked in almost all of Brazil's states and has also wreaked havoc on the country's economy, with exports being backed up and fuel running low across the country. The government tried to end the walkout by passing legislation on a diesel tax cut, which eventually fell through due to a calculating error. Brazil's state-run oil company Petrobras said Wednesday it would cut diesel prices by 10% for 2 weeks, but this measure was not accepted by the Truckers Association. Truckers are angry over rising diesel prices, eating into their profits, and are demanding long-term relief from Brasilia.
Well, thank you as always to Arnaud Adam for the international news there. And apologies for the technical glitches. It is 2018, but from time to time, gremlins do find themselves burrowing into the system. So we do apologise for that. It is part of the joy of live television. But now we are finally going to get some perspective from the United States on the big North Korea stories of the day, namely President Trump's cancellation of the North Korea-US summit, Pyongyang's reaction and the regime's demolition of its nuclear test site. I am very happy finally to be joined on Skype by Henry Sokolsky, Executive Director of the Washington-based Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center. I would like to start by asking your reaction to President Trump's decision to suddenly pull the plug on the summit with Kim Jong-un, and whether you think this was the right move.
I think it was, because both parties, North Korean and American, wanted the talks, but for very different reasons. And it was becoming clear that if they had the talks as soon as they originally planned, it would be embarrassing, at least for the Americans and arguably even for the North Koreans.
Well, it seemed to be the case that there weren't many pre-steps put in place prior to this planned summit, and it may have been a situation where you put the cart in front of the horse. But let's talk about North Korea's response, because they have done so within the past couple of hours. We reported at the top of the newscast about this statement from the Vice Foreign Minister there in Pyongyang. It was surprisingly gentle and measured, to be honest, and it came quickly as well by the North standards. Normally they take a while to come up with a response. Does the lack of the usual heated, bellicose rhetoric surprise you? Because it seems to suggest, at least to some people, that Trump has the upper hand in these negotiations now.
I don't know who has the upper hand, but I think both parties want to get to talks at some point. I'm not that optimistic that they'll agree to things that are going to be as dramatic as everyone's hoping. But for various reasons, once trade problems, perhaps even with China, are still a bit down, I bet you we will be hearing more news about the revival of these talks. I don't think we've heard the last of this by a long shot.
Well, as President Trump likes to say, we'll see what happens, I guess.
Yes.
Now let's turn to the North's demolition of its Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Kim Jong-un said in April that the regime had completed its quest for nuclear weapons. Do you really think Pyongyang is at the point where it doesn't need to test any more nuclear devices?
I suppose if what they're interested in is a weapon that they can put on a long-range missile that could hit the United States and destroy a city center, they have what they need already. It's pretty clear that they could have a weapon at least the size of the Hiroshima device. I can't imagine that if one of those kinds of weapons were set off above an American city, that we would say, oh, well, but it's not as high yield as what we have. I think that would be more than enough. So in one sense, they probably have the minimal design information they need for that mission. They could test more, but I'm not sure they absolutely need to achieve that mission.
And would it be possible for the regime to carry on testing nuclear bombs without the rest of the world knowing? There have been reports suggesting North Korea could have some kind of other site in another remote part of the country built into a mountain somewhere. Or would that technically be impossible to do in an undetectable manner because of things like seismic readings, etc.?
My sense is that it's quite possible to do, and it would be debated hotly as to whether it could be detected. But in the end, there is even a debate as we consider this question tonight about whether there has been an additional test that went undetected. And the reason why is seismic signals, which is just feeling shaking in the earth, can be what they call decoupled. If you build a large enough hole, there are ways to set a weapon off that doesn't give much of a signal. And so I think the short answer is they could still test, and we might not be fully convinced that they have.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we are out of time. We appreciate your insights, Henry. That was Henry Sokolsky, Executive Director for the Washington-based Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center on the cancellation of the summit and the demolition of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that is where we are going to leave it for now. We'll be back again with our next newscast. It is coming up at noon, Korea time. Until then, goodbye.